The infinity loop is the tools of communication that heals and glues society back together. Our podcast is about disruption. We disturb the system that says it's normal and okay to communicate in the old, tired, ineffective, and unintelligent ways. There's a cynical belief rooted in so many of us in which we've told ourselves we can't help how we think or behave because our brains are so wired to react from low-level consciousness that's habitual and automatic. We're coming from our egos where they're running the show and not the infinity loop, where the ego is in a helpful place as a healthy sense of self, so it can help us be in our connected, abundant selves. We're saying by intentionally stepping into the infinity loop, we can affect every interaction we have and change the world. The Infinity Loop Group podcast is going to be about moving from the either-or to both-and way of thinking, where we transcend and include, as Ken Wilber teaches, in which we transcend the limitations of the old masculine and old feminine, but include what is healthy and helpful. What will emerge is a new, balanced, and integrated masculinity and femininity. The time has come where the divine feminine way of being is going to arise. We must learn from it as we let our old ways die, so a new human is resurrected and transfigured. That new human will truly change the world. This podcast is also about having a growth mindset, which hungers to love well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care. We face our wounds, egos, and shadows in preparation to give this life everything we've got to make the world more connected and beautiful, because we're more connected and beautiful.
Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group podcast. I'm Riley Burns.
I'm Chris DeVorce.
And we're going to dive right back into the Infinity Loop book when we were going to be where we left off. It's time to kiss the leper. If you have forgiven yourself for being imperfect and falling, you can now do it for just about everyone else. If you have not done it for yourself, I'm afraid you will likely pass on your sadness, absurdity, judgment, futility to others. Richard Rohr.
Mm-hmm. And you were commenting how that does bring up the point we were making before, or the nuance about if you need to love yourself to be able to love other people more fully. And that is kind of a validation of that.
Well, so I think as we just dissect it more and more, and how you said it's not that people can't love other people when they don't love themselves. It's more that all their feelings that are outside of love become more of versions of projections. So it's not that they can't love, because everyone can always love. It's that all the other things that come out of that person is usually a projection, not a reality, right? So
if it's unhealed, yeah.
Right, so when they don't truly love themselves, they usually can still love others, but when they are then commenting usually negatively or attacking someone, you start realizing that these attacks don't really hold any truth to them, because they are really
talking about themselves.
Right, they're projections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that's that nuance of it.
So good. I mean, that thing by Richard Rohr, that statement is so profound. And why it is so important to be able to live in the reality of deep forgiveness of yourself, reality, the world, everything. And then you can just hold that spaciousness, because that is the letting go, and then you can see people differently. I mean, that's the infinity loop, is the ability to see differently. And when you have forgiven yourself, and you have forgiven the world, and you have forgiven reality, you don't need to put it on anybody else. It's just this letting. And so, right, you have a capacity to see people. Saint Francis of Assisi, who lived 1182 to 1226, is my hero. He's the star of Franco Zeffirelli's 1972 film Brother Sun, Sister Moon, and the priest with the bird resting on his hand in the garden statues. He was a spiritual genius. Francis brought us back to the connection to the earth and a dignity and a connection to all of creation. Franciscan spirituality is considered an alternative orthodoxy. Francis saw the blessing in all, not the curse. What I recognized as my home in him, which began in my teen years, was his courageous and contagious love that moved him to leave his father's house with the wealth that was poor in love, in joy, and in freedom, to the outskirts where the lepers lived. His encounter with the leper broke through all his fear and shields and wooed him to an awakening that made him the person with the longest bibliography in the Library of Congress, so I've heard. Francis's brilliant contribution to our evolution in the midst of middle-aged religion was his ability to incorporate the negative, the leper. What we're so ashamed of, what seems so disfigured and diseased in us, what we try so hard to push into the shadow, is to be loved, accepted, even kissed. When we kiss our faults, the leper who beams right in front of us, we're on our way to getting free, even someday as free as the birds. When we kiss the ugly situation, loss, shame, shitstorm, we embrace what is, and our disgust turns to love of what is. Then we embrace the leper in another. We kiss even what we most fear, and the kiss transforms us. We're in the flow where love comes in, and we realize we're greater than fear.
To me, it kind of reminds me of just the old fairy tale of kissing the frog to be a prince. And so it's kind of like how you can see the prince or queen in anyone once you're willing to kiss the frog or the leper inside of them. Wow. Right? It's like another metaphor of that, of you can truly see the highest quality of someone's selves when you also see the darkest sides of them and are willing to love both sides of them.
You know, as I was reading this, I was flashing on my life and how this has been so true. And I got in therapy when I was 25. You were 6 months old. And and then I was, in therapy for I don't know how many years, on and off. But I remember seeing you, Riley, and all these things that were like me. And I was so hard on you because I hadn't accepted myself, and I was like so afraid that you were going to turn out like me. And my therapist said, and what would be wrong with that? And isn't that interesting? It was just your freedom and your joy and your enthusiasm and your dancing and it was like I was trying to squelch that because that had been so shamed in me. And now, wow, talk about full circle. And I look at you and go, you're the biggest gift I've ever had in this life, and my healing. But that's exactly what it is so much of our judgments of other people. That's again, what narcissism is so about is the shame that we feel that we split from. We don't even see it in ourselves, and we just find such disgust in other people, and that's where some of the meanness comes out and this judgment. But this lessons of how Saint Francis of Assisi moved through his short 44 years of life, and why he had such an enormous impact on the world. But that is there's so many things that we will keep. That when we talked about that's being a leader, is the ability to kiss the leper, is because you will look upon people with so much love, because you see again yourself in them, and you have come to acceptance. You have come home, to that. And then
it's like seeing the queen or king in someone, even when they're acting like the frog or the leper.
Yeah.
Right. So it's seeing past what they're projecting.
Yeah, that's love. That's how the divine can see. That's what the infinity loop is how do we see with the eyes that are coming through us are actually God's eyes. And we see ourself, we see the world, we see reality through these eyes. Francis wore his garment covered with patches because he wanted to show what he was on the inside, covered with patches. He wasn't afraid of his faults. They were irrelevant in this encounter with love and freedom. When one reaches the point where they're who they are, warts and all, they have seen themselves in the leper and love the sun and the moon as their family. They have kissed a freedom that makes them sing and write poetry. The other thing about St. Francis is I'm a very much a 7 in the Enneagram. I'm like a hilarious, like, you're such a 7. And Francis was a 7. But it is that joy that he got, that freedom that he got. And it's interesting, in March of 94, I was 28 years old, and my father had died 6 months prior. And I produced, completely funded, I think about how much money I spent. I was like, all my funding came out. It was in South Orange County in a evangelical church, and I was getting involved in AIDS ministry, and that was considered the leprosy of the time. And I was trying to build a bridge with the church to see it differently. And the metaphor of what it would be like for us to go toward what we see is so shameful and, judged. Because that was also, the lepers were seen as they brought it upon themselves, that their own sin is manifest with this leprosy on the outside. And that's the shadow of religion, right? How do we, this judgmental energy that we can hold the smaller J, judgment, right? Going, oh, that's where these people need to be developed. Oh, that's where these people are not making wise choices, and really seeing it with love and development. How do we help somebody? Because we can't help anybody from a judger place, is one of the principles. You have to be able to come from seeing them again with love, seeing them. And there's no disgust. Every time we have disgust, we're at the first look, right? And you can hold again, this is not helpful, this is not working, but we hold it with such love and reverence, and the centering of knowing how deeply we are like that very person. On one level or the other, it's the human condition, right?
Yeah, I think that's perfect going into our reflection questions. What aspect of yourself or your past do you despise or try to run from in shame? How do you run from it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm thinking just about my own journey, is I was converted to becoming a born again evangelical at 16. And by 18, so it was just my 18th, so it was just like a year and, oh, it was in March. So it was like a year and a half later, I, with someone in the church, got into a cult, which we'll go into, so fascinating. But it was 2 years of just such a psychopathic human being, so unbelievably messed up. But how after that, there was just so much of trying to be normal. And I was, before I got in the cult, I was just fasting 1 or 2 days a week, prayer, intercessory prayer. I mean, there were so many beautiful things in my pursuit, but I thought that my pursuits of wanting to be whole and holy was what led me. I was very falsely interpreted what happened to me. That's what led me to this cult, and it wasn't. It was my wounds, my needing to be mentored, my abuse, all this different stuff. But after that, how much of my life was about trying to compensate for the amount of shame that was put on me. And I realized this judgment that I never had before just started really coming out of judging other people. You know, that I'm okay.
So you're saying from your own shame, you turn to becoming more judgment of others. Mm-hmm. That really makes me think of someone very in particular right now who I want to keep their space.
We're never going to call anybody out. Yeah,
but that's just thinking of that made me think of someone who I go, why are they so angry and mad? Mm-hmm. And the more I know about their life is probably because of how much of a shame they are in the way that they're living their life.
Mm-hmm. Not loving themselves. Yeah. And the self-hatred, because we know when we don't have self-control and loving and happy, and we have the, right?
Yeah.
We know it.
Well, I mean, you know it better than anyone else. No matter what someone no matter what you lie to yourself about it, you know it deep down.
Yeah.
All right. In what ways have you allowed the leper in you to name who you are as less than fully loved and lovable? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that kind of just goes in what you were saying about how you run away. When you were feeling the shame, you weren't feeling loved or lovable.
Yeah, I was marked. I was damaged goods, and I hadn't, that's why I have such a passion to help people go to this level of healing. There was a whole kind of like, okay, we're gonna, dust you off and just focus on your goals now. It was just 2 years of your life. Let's get over it. It's like, no. I remember a psychiatrist said to me, my late 30s, goes, you should have actually gone away to like a freaking healing retreat for 6 months, right? To heal that level of a trauma and post-traumatic stress that was done to you. And thankfully, we really are getting all of those beautiful technologies now to help people heal.
So would you say that was like how you were overcompensating? Was to just kind of pretend it didn't even happen,
Well, it was also brought up all the time. Well, she was in a cult. She was in a cult. She was in a cult. And people that talk about leprosy, they just like, people would go, you shouldn't even tell people that. Or
like you must not be smart if you fell for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, some of the most high Ivy League educated people. There's also fascinating, between 18 and 20 and exactly 2 years is like the highest vulnerability for a cult. Isn't that interesting? It was like
Well, it makes sense as we've gone away from the acts of becoming an adult, the word I'm
like initiation.
yeah, we've lost
yeah.
initiation. So to me, when someone is spiritually inclined or desires a more spiritual development in their self, when we don't have it in society, that's when people can prey upon people. And so that to me makes sense. But that 18 to 20 would be when you desire it the most, because it hasn't happened in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't had the initiation that really gives you the tools and empowers you to be making those decisions.
And then
in
we'll
the
go
world.
into really all the different things. But it's so interesting. So one of Leo's close friends that he was in the army with went off to Nam between 18 and 20. And the amount of trauma that he had, and he has, his psychiatrist that he's in his 70s now, but said to him, from 18 and 20 is this special window where you can actually integrate and heal just all these things about your childhood, your trauma. Isn't that wild? Almost like a reset. And if you go through something that's like being in war, what that does to you. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
How could you love better if you loved the leper in yourself and another? I think it's pretty just obvious and noticeable. It's one of those things when you have more compassion for yourself, more patience, more understanding, you have it for others. Because we are so critical on ourselves, when we move away from that criticism and more into the compassion and love for ourselves, it's so much easier to have it for others, because we are not pretending that we're perfect, but acknowledging our shortcomings. And so then we don't have to pretend other people need to be perfect, and we're able to acknowledge their shortcomings without enabling bad behavior, but encouraging growth and just being like, I see you, I love you, and I am here in this moment.
You've come home to yourself, so then you're a home for other people. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking about how I've seen certain clients, like say they struggle with anger, and they really almost hate themselves that they have patterns where they act out their anger toward their family members. And and they hate themselves. And that just like makes it worse. They hate this part of them. And it's like, ugh. Instead of just diving so deeply into loving that part of them that struggles, would create the space in their awareness to be able to then make choices from emotional sobriety, and they could go to connection and awareness and inquiry. But when we have the leper that we have not yet kissed, we can't even enter into the infinity loop. Right?
Yeah, because
you have to kiss the leper to get in, right?
So much
to connect to yourself.
So much a part of the infinity loop is the ability to have the self-reflection, right? And so you can't be open to someone else's perspective when you're closed off to your own perspective, right? You're kind of pretending that parts of you don't exist. And so you're not looking at the big picture.
It's interesting, which I didn't make clear before, but in clarifying the infinity loop about that meeting about racism, it really where the abuse came from, it came all from white people. It was their own shame and their almost white guilt that was just coming on. That like, I gotta make this right. I gotta fix all this, the sins of our people. And we need to take action, and we need to get really into this and get all behind it. And this is what they're saying we need to do. And then they were just like projecting. Like this one guy who grew up in Texas, and his father was this total racist. So it's going, oh, well, clearly your father taught you that. And I'm like, where could you possibly get that from what I'm saying? And I didn't, and it was so far from how I was raised. But that's that very thing. Like they were projecting their own shame. Who's going to be the scapegoat of how of what we're doing wrong. It's like, now I'm on the right side. That's so much of what even the conversion, as beautiful as things about Christianity are. I mean, it could be like, I'm now in the right, thank God I'm in the right camp. Thank God I've got all the answers. Now I can feel okay about myself.
Women who run with the wolves. Through her soul, though her soul requires seeing the culture around her, requires sightlessness, though her soul wishes to speak its truth, she is pressured to be silent. Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Yeah. Women who run with the wolves, yeah. I'm going to go over a conversation, and you can play the other person.
Yeah, wonderful.
About this insights from her wonderful work. Yeah.
What's gotten me through difficult times is to have a reason for the difficult times. To go into the myth empowers me to be the hero. I then feel okay that I earned my battle scars. Everyone has different ways of how they get through.
But what you choose is the transformational path, as we call it, where the focus is on our inner work and what the struggle teaches us about ourselves rather than how we're just victims.
I'm over the story because I've gotten so many gifts from it. I don't want it to be dragged into the drama of it. That doesn't empower me. It's more empowering to me to share the lessons than the story. I brought up the story of Bluebird from Women Who Run with the Wolves. We were in a book club on it for years ago. The book remains among my collection.
Yeah, this is all about me. This is actually me saying this
stuff.
stuff.
My apologies.
It's all good.
You're right.
That's good.
Why don't you jump in
Okay.
now then?
Even in the ruthless donation of most of my books, I believe it needs to be combed through over and over throughout my years. Had I actually done that, it may have woken me up to where I was unconscious. In describing Women with the Wolves, myths and stories of the wild woman archetype, it is said, within every woman lives a powerful force filled with good instincts, passionate creativity, and ageless knowing. She is the wild woman who presents the instinctual nature of women, but she is an endangered species.
Bluebird
It's actually Bluebeard. I know.
Bluebeard resonated with me. It's a lesson of a woman who doesn't have her voice yet. Her husband tells his wife, "Here are the keys. You can go into any room, but not this one room." The sisters in the story who represent our female tribe encourage her to go into this forbidden room.
Dr. Estes. The sisters also represent our soul's curiosity and our impulse towards consciousness.
She hasn't found her power yet, so she questions herself. And when she finally opens the door, there's the skeleton of all Bluebeard's other wives. Because at this point in the story, she doesn't have her power, the sisters call in the brothers who represent the masculine, and she hasn't integrated. Once a woman finds that, nothing can stop her. There's nothing more powerful and beautiful than a woman is grounded in her divine feminine and divine masculine.
So good what she said. Dr. Estes teaches from this story that the captor is the dark man who lives in every woman's psyches. That's what I was talking about before in that other podcast, that it's inside of us that we shut it down, right? That's on the chapter, I Had a Dream. It's the voice in us that doesn't want us to honor our soul's impulse to be curious and awake. That's a thing that just shuts down inquiry, right? Just don't ask questions.
Don't think for yourself.
Don't think for yourself. Don't ask questions. Don't follow your instincts. Get along. Be the peacemaker. Over-adapt. It wants us to be nice. Versus, I clarify the difference between being nice and being kind as a big difference. Especially when we're doing, when we get into the different fields of conversation, is we have to go past the quote unquote being nice of just quote unquote politeness that is just like making sure anything's ever brought up, to real authenticity.
Yeah, I mean, I think niceness has caused us to get to where we are as far as a lot of our problems, because niceness allows a lot of negative behavior to continue, because you aren't being kind, which would be to actually call it out, but you are being nice, which allows that negative behavior to continue.
False. It can be very false. I mean, not that being a nice person is not a wonderful quality, but it's it's a little packed with what the hell does that mean, right? It can be very false.
Yeah, I mean,
and not helpful.
It's very rarely a characteristic of a leader.
Ooh. To restrain this predator, a woman must keep in possession of all her instincts. We women must develop a relationship with our wildish nature. That's a quote from her. Wild women must protect their soulful lives. So even though I talk about the divine masculines as protective, it's like, no, in a really integrated woman, I mean, like a woman protects children, right? There's this very, very powerful protective nature. And you can feel that. That's why I love older women when they become, crones. It's so regal. I love being 58 years old.
Well, and from at least my childhood, the mother was the protector, because so rarely we are actually attacked physically anymore, so that our emotions are what need to be protected and honored, right? And that is what the mother does, is she protects and honors those emotions and feelings that we go through as a child. And so to me, that in modern day is more important to be that protector.
And I would say that's why a wildish woman is so integrated with the masculine, because one of the areas of contention in society right now is where these overprotective women are making us mothers fragile. Why? Right? I mean, that is a legit, I would call that's the shadow, evolved toxic femininity.
Well, I would say that that's the mother focusing on being nice, and not being kind and protective.
Yeah, and not allowing the space of the strength of the masculine, and the father. That's again some of the male bashing and going, ooh, what is it like to just honor that healthy masculine and how they talk to the children, the standard, the two different ways, without going into toxic femininity that is overly submissive, right? It is just so integrated, and they're not putting their brain in hawks. Everything is on board. All their intelligence, their instincts, their loves, their gifts, everything that has wizened them through what they have learned in life. And that is truly my view of a infinity couple, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't really, I don't see enough teaching on that. So, we are no longer naive, meaning now we have been wizened. We are no longer oh, no, he doesn't have dead bodies in the attic. No, I don't know why he's not letting me go down there. We are awake to that it is, right?
Yeah.
We must use our wits to do what needs to be done about what we see. It's another quote from Dr. Estes. This is more from her. When a woman's instinctual nature is strong, which is I had read before in about I had a dream, She intuitively recognizes the innate predator by scent, sight, and hearing, anticipates its presence, hears it approaching, and takes steps to turn it away. In the instinct-injured woman, the predator is upon her before she registers its presence. For her listening, her knowing, and her apprehensions are impaired, mainly by introjects which exhort her to be nice, to behave, and especially to be blind to being misused. The naive or injured woman is in collusion to even not knowing. She is then lured by things that promise life but only lead to death of her spirit. Dr. Estes writes, as long as a woman is forced into believing she is powerless and or trained to not consciously register what she knows to be true, the feminine impulses and gifts of her psyche continue to be killed off. Ugh.
I listen to my instincts, and if I don't let anyone overpower them, I suffer. Thankfully, I wake up. It's my connection to my higher self.
No. It's actually, I listen to my instincts, and if I don't, I'm sorry, I may have
And if
heard.
I let anyone overpower them, I suffer.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I wake up in my connection to my higher self. If I don't listen, I'm in big trouble. So I try to listen to my instinct and my soul. My soul is what I feel is my connection to God. Even 29 years ago, I was aware of my internal no, of my instincts, but I overrode them. Our instincts to listen to our souls were not supported in society in the era we grew up. Had our culture known how to support women to listen to our instincts, I would have a very different life. But that wasn't my journey. My journey was to learn this way.
It's just such beautiful, that's the beauty of feminism. I think feminism now, the latest wave, has turned a complicated, unhelpful turn in many ways. But that is what we needed. We needed that empowerment that was coming from from feminism. Again, I wrote to my friend, you take the transformational path. You choose to accept it, not expect life to be any different or that it should be easy, and you move toward wisdom.
It's not the life of being identified with our life. All these parts are persona in reality. When your world is stripped clean by trauma, you soon realize these roles you play, these attachments to your persona mean absolutely nothing. So you learn to go deeper. You dive deeper for the gems, going deep into your soul. Into the underworld, no one is able to take those jewels of wisdom from you. The gifts of wisdom take you out of the victim mode to hero mode, because no one can take away the gifts from the experiences. These gifts make our lives richer. And this is truly how the worst things that happen in our lives can truly become the best, when we get the lessons from them and use them to help others.
I was thinking, I was just, was coming up, Carolyn Mace is teaching a class with Mirabai Starr, who is an author who I quote in this book, but she is they're doing a series on grief, and she lost her 14-year-old in a car crash from one minute to the next, so she is very initiated in grief. But how we go through all of that process and then, fight reality and then come to the place of where the angels come in, and we are so soft in this brokenness that the divine can access us, and the gifts that can come in even through, that would be the hardest thing I could imagine going through, is the death of a child. So it's that is exactly it, is seeing in the transformational path where we are not alone, and when we are able to live in that wizened place of deep self acceptance of reality.
Well, that's perfect for these reflection questions. When in your life have you been uninitiated and innocently fell prey to what wouldn't serve you?
I would say that's a part of how my psyche was damaged for so many years. People would just go like, "You fucking idiot!" Like not seeing things that I should be
Yeah, I
seeing.
mean, I definitely think my 20s was filled with not having the initiation that I
Yeah,
needed.
yeah.
So that caused me to create relationships that weren't serving me, that were
That were
actually
taking advantage of
right
you.
falling
Oh
prey.
man.
And so I feel like a lot of that was because I didn't have a healthy initiation. And so that definitely resonates for me and the troubles I went through.
Yeah.
Um, in what ways will being fully awake to see what you need to see help you as a leader? I mean, to me,
Oh.
that is ultimately what being a leader is about the ability to see the bigger picture, right? Like, to me,
To see people that you're even developing, right? To be able to see. But go ahead.
right. Well, so often we want to focus on the person that's in front, uh, paving the way, and I feel like um, as a collective we kind of know where we need to go, and so that is no longer the style of leader we need. We need the style of leader that is actually going to be more like the wolf of the pack that goes to the back to make sure that the slowest and the weakest of us aren't left behind and protect them. Because to me, that's what seeing the bigger picture is ultimately about, is you don't need to be in front, but you need to help everyone else. And that's the type of leaders I think we need now, no longer this in front leader.
Yeah. Everything's changing, huh?
Um, what would it be like to have a regular practice to tell your psyche you're ready to see what you need to see? I mean, to me, that's what embodying the infinity loop is about, is having these tools to have that practice. So how do you go to the inquiry on yourself? How do you have
The inner stillness that's even going, what do I know?
the inner stillness?
What don't I know? What
to
don't I
have the
see?
second look, to always be going for the bigger picture.
And that was something as you as my accountability partner, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Perfect.
But a situation where I was deciding to trust somebody again, and I said, I believe that if there is something that I need to see, that it will come to the surface. Remember? And I brought that invitation
And it
just to my
always
psyche,
does.
and it did,
And
right?
it always does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as we practice this more, it just naturally comes into our psyche. And the last question is, what do you need to see? I think this is just a question for us all to be always asking ourselves, especially when we are emotionally triggered. It's really easy to go into restricted awareness, and that is the time we need to be asking ourselves the most. What do we need to see? Because when we are in restricted awareness, we are choosing to not see things. We are focusing on whatever is stimulating that behavior or that feeling, whether it's negativity, anger, hatred. It's
Yeah.
all
The
usually,
constricted awareness.
non-positive feelings that
Yeah.
you're feeling. And instead of reacting on those, we need to have the stillness and ask ourselves, what do we need to see?
Yeah.
That's living in the infinity loop. All right. Women Who Run with the Wolves, Part 2. What does this wildest intuition do for women? Like the wolf, intuition has claws that pry things open and pin things down. It has eyes that can see through the shields of persona. It has ears that hear beyond the range of human hearing. With these formidable psychic tools, a woman takes on a shrewd and even
Precognitive.
precognitive
Animal
animal
consciousness.
consciousness. One that deepens her femininity and sharpens her ability to move confidently in other world.
That's what was so painful for me, is because I did have this. It was like I would have this precognitive, like I would have the ability from a small child to just see things, but I couldn't act on them because of the way my trauma and my that I talked about before. But like that, so that nature was there, that gift that was trying to protect me, that the innate predator in me kept shooting it down because I wasn't strengthened enough to stand in it. I was a little thing.
Well, to me, that goes in the sense of, like, if the universe told you everything that was going to happen in your life, even with that information, you wouldn't be able to do anything different if you weren't healed, because your trauma is going to cause you to create the same mistakes over and over again, even if you know that mistake and challenge is coming. Without being healed from that trauma, you will continue making that mistake.
Yeah. It's like times where have gone like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing right now, but I can't break it. Right?
Yeah.
So she gives this friend that I'm having this dialogue with, gives her thoughts on how to be what she called a wolfy woman.
Like I said before, I have to find meaning in what transpires. I need a higher vision that's beyond the victim. The waking up begins when the hardship begins. In my life, there's always gifts in the hardship. I spot manipulation or whatever now. I'm not knee-jerk now with any of my decisions. I weigh things out. That's the wisdom that has given me. Then there is how I learn to climb back into my body, to feel the emotions. I need to feel and process them. What do the messages of my emotions and body tell me? I've learned this through self-awareness, witness consciousness. I observe myself.
That's what witness consciousness is, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is the connection to my breath. And then being aware of where I feel it in my body, where I feel it in my body. I feel it in my throat, chest, anywhere. This tells me intuitively, thank you, what needs to happen. If it's in my throat, then I know I need to speak up. If it's in my heart, I practice self-inquiry. Where am I shutting down? Hurt, where do I need to open my heart? If it's in my gut, it's my intuition. That sick to my stomach, nauseous feeling is usually an attack. Where do I need to honor myself? If it's in my gut, it's a root, not safe, like primal, home, money, personal relationships, grounding, survival, primal needs.
We know from the mind-body connection that even our ailments tell us something, as they represent aspects of ourselves and our relationships. We're the one, and I said, you're the one who introduced me to that so many years ago.
What am I feeling and where? I give myself a reality check. Try to take ownership if mine. Try to let others' business go. I need to know my inner work. I like to embrace inner work as play. It's fun to explore some things about myself versus guilt and shame. My kids call me menopause mom or Newport Beach girl, which makes it more light, compassionate, to give grace to that part of myself and allow it. Once we allow it, we move through it. I like to hold the space for it too. I have to work on that because I try to be perfect. Throughout the day, I'm in witness consciousness. Sometimes I want to hang out and be in the specific space, but I'm aware that I choose to do that. Then I'm ready to let it go. Self-care is freaking huge.
That's what I said, yeah.
I've learned how to do that pretty damn fast compared to what I used to do.
Oh, no, she said that. You're right. But I feel that too. Self-care is freaking huge. That's what I said. When you allow yourself to wake up, see what you need to discern, feel what you need to. In self-care, you don't flee from yourself, betray your discernment, your heart, your body, and your needs. Instead, you make yourself number one in the self-care aspect. But not in an imbalanced way where one would say you aren't free from yourself. That would go into like narcissistic self-care, where there's so much like, you need to put yourself first, where it's sometimes not appropriate. You got to get up and take care of the baby, even though you're going to lose sleep. When done with elegance and intelligence, that's what that would look like. Taking care of ourselves enables us to be more in our true self versus the small self. When we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed, which they talk about in AA, it's more difficult to drop into our abundant selves. That's why we need to be compassionate with ourselves when we can't, and attuned to what we need.
There was an adjustment because I used to put my children and husband before me, and now I honestly say I love myself and wish every woman loved themselves. And I think that this is true, though, is at least in my own experience with my mother, and how I've never not felt that you've loved me, but I would say I could feel more fully loved in a non-codependent way the more you loved yourself. And I really, it really was another level of love and protection from you once you were loving and protecting yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. We're enculturated to caretake and shame to have boundaries. I still see that. That's what I talk about, even the chauvinism, and where there's this men who haven't done enough of the work, and women that are conspiring in this belief system are, you need to adapt, you need to adjust, you need to make it about my needs, you need to not question me, as the masculine.
Well, and what's funny for me, at least, I find the boundaries are actually the opposite. That I love you so much that I'm willing to express my boundaries so that you can have a relationship with me.
You're leading with your boundaries, right, as Henry Cloud would say.
To me, that is, because if I didn't love you, I would just not have a relationship with you. I wouldn't, the boundaries would be, I don't need to talk to this person. But
you wouldn't invest.
But to me, expressing boundaries is one of the biggest forms of love language, of I'm willing to put the effort in to express my boundaries to make this relationship work.
I love it. You're really good at that. It's all of it. The being present and observing part. Because asking myself what I need is observing myself too. Self-inquiry. If we don't, we leave ourselves in a bad way, and it cuts us off from our instincts, our wolfy, wildish nature that's crucial for us being in the world.
Exactly. I had to retrain myself because I served my family so much in the extreme. What I have to ask myself to check in with myself. Do I feel like doing this? Do I know that now 99% of the time my family...
I do that now, yeah.
...had to learn that I have to do what feeds me? It's an ongoing lesson for me. You've known me for decades, and you know me so well. You recently pointed out to me how I've overcompensated and have been hyper responsible, and I lost some of my fun balance in mind, body, and spirit is one of my greatest gifts.
Yeah, because that balance, he says, is, and that's the infinity loop. It represents balance. It is that balance in mind, body, and spirit.
Well, and I find too, once you love yourself more fully, too, serving others is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself, because you're coming from a place of abundance, not from a place of lack. So when you're serving others, it's never like something is coming out of you, but so much more is coming through you.
Right. And we're both, that's one of our huge values for both of us is service, is we love to be of service because it's like, it forces you in the infinity, like,
Well, it's purpose.
it's
When you're
purpose
when
and
you're being
you're-
of service to others, you feel like you have a purpose in the world because you do, because you are helping someone have a better day, a better life, a better
and they
moment.
are not and I really feel that they are not separate from me. So the joy, it's not like they're taking from me. It's this life-giving force where I have more joy for them than sometimes they even have.
It's
like
the abundance coming
it's
through
the
you.
abundance, it's the ability to live in this flow that just keeps feeding you and feeding you and feeding you when you're in that purity of service, which is part of both of our spiritual practice.
Amen.
Oh, yes, and how that balance in mind, body, and spirit all play into lightness and joy. We live high-performance lives, be on our game to live our most courageous lives, and not be neurotic, which one way is to define it as unbalanced.
Too much restriction or overindulgence isn't the answer. I've taught my kids, all in their 20s, to check in with their own balance instead of me being the one to point it out.
Mm-hmm. We get stuck in our idealized self, right? That's because we haven't kissed the leper, which is neither self-acceptance nor self-love. It kills some of our aliveness or wolfy women nature. Then we're not aware of what serves. It's all part of being awake. It's learning how to love well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care.
What I need is to feed my soul. I'm very selective of what my soul is being fed. Food, yoga, what I read, healthy people, sleep. My body is sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
I would add throwing in the ocean.
Yeah,
in the ocean.
I would say that's, one of the best things you can do. The transformational path, the awareness of ourselves, the messages our emotions and bodies tell us, our wisdom, instincts, balance, and self-care all serve us as wolfy women who take the key and unlock the door of what is unconscious. A woman who runs with the wolves is Wonder Woman, who stands in the infinity loop and changes the world. And I would say all this also applies to where is this, in men. It's always look, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does witness consciousness seem like to you? How will you observe your thoughts more than you think them, more than just think them? I can know how much that has affected my life of just my practice of being patient. And what is patience? In a world where it's so easy to find something to distract us, I find patience is truly a skill that I am truly always trying to cultivate. And I think a lot of that comes from just witnessing my consciousness and giving myself the time to do that instead of rushing off to the next thing. Maybe I'm waiting for someone. I don't need to distract myself, to just sit in that time and see what this consciousness comes up for, and how I can be the best version of myself when that person finally does arrive, and not worry about, they're 5 minutes late or they're wasting my time. Yeah.
So the impatience is actually can come because we're not willing to sit and witness it, right? We have to flee this discomfort versus coming home to ourselves going, I can invite this discomfort, this emptiness that's not having something to do, right? Good.
What practices do you have in place to help yourself pay attention to what your emotions and body tell you?
You want to talk about you?
Well, you
kind of did.
Yeah, it's exactly kind of what do you need to see. We're always asking ourselves these questions.
You've come back. I would say when you came back to loving yourself, and that experience of divine love, that was the game changer for everything. You didn't have to flee yourself. You could sit and watch. Yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, and when you make that decision too, so many other decisions in your life are made for you by making that decision, right? All the other right decisions kind of fall into place because you're coming from that place of self-love, that you don't have to worry about what the next steps are because they're coming from love and they just happen more naturally. What strategies will you put in place to stay in balance, not too much restriction or indulgence, but healthy, life-giving choices? I mean, I know one of my biggest practices that we both do that I really just love and want to do for the rest of my life are fasting of 5 days every 3 months.
Juice fasting.
Because I find when we... there is this balance of the physical and the emotional. And when we have this physical cleanse every 3 months...
That forces us to stay so present to ourselves, right?
I find that any emotional thing I might have suppressed or anything really comes up and is reflected, and it goes... hey, you can't keep this down while also not having food to cover it up kind of thing. That's
so true.
And
so
that's to me, that is the ultimate way that we stay balanced in our practice.
Of what comes up for us. Wow. Because you're not numbing it with food, right?
Right. Yeah. Or even the time that it takes to eat the food. So now you have more time to really dive into the feelings that are coming up. You don't have other ways to escape those feelings, and you really feel them fully. And to me, it's been the most emotionally sobering practice that we've
been
done.
Doing it for like 3.25 years, and it's been so life-changing. Yeah.
Well,
and it's made us stronger every single time. Like, talk about freaking becoming a wolf.
Well,
you know.
And I think that really is important with these next questions too. Is there something you're ready to let go that doesn't feed you? I find that when we do this, those things are pointed out a lot quicker that maybe we would have entertained or allowed them to linger longer. But because we are having that reflection by not eating and embracing the emotions that come up, I find that we are able to remove things much more efficiently.
So true. Thank you.
And the last question is, there's something you need to be honest about and let go in terms of caring or caretaking. I don't feel that way right now in my life, but only because I have a wonderful accountability buddy that would maybe point those things out if there was something I...
and you do the same for me. And I'm always willing to look at that. Yeah.
Well, and I think part of the practice is that we're always looking at these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is the end for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Infinity Loop Group podcast. If these stuff resonated with you, please like, subscribe, share. It really helps us out. Comment.
You want to talk to us?
Please, we'd love to respond and help out in any way we can. Have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.